Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer. And before you skip this video, let me ask you something. What if I told you that a simple dime sitting in your pocket right now, a coin you might use to buy a piece of gum or toss into a parking meter without a second thought, could actually be worth $69 million? Yes, you heard that right, 69 million. Most people walk past fortunes every single day. They handle these coins, they spend them, they ignore them, never realizing that one small error, one tiny imperfection from the mint could turn their loose change into a life-changing jackpot that would make even lottery winners jealous. And today we're diving deep into the world of the 1998 D-Dime, a coin so rare, so extraordinary, that it has collectors, investors, and everyday people like you and me scrambling through their change jars, couch cushions, and old piggy banks hoping to find the ultimate treasure. Now, let me paint you a picture of what $69 million actually means. That's enough money to buy multiple mansions in Beverly Hills, a fleet of luxury cars, private jets, yachts, and still have tens of millions left over to live off the interest alone for the rest of your life and your children's lives and probably your grandchildren's lives too. This isn't some fantasy or clickbait exaggeration. This is the real deal. A genuine valuation that has sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and has people across America checking every single dime they come across with magnifying glasses and jeweler's loupes, desperately searching for that one magical coin that could change everything. But here's where it gets even more interesting, and I want you to stick with me until the very end of this video because after we explore this incredible 1998 D-Dime, I'm going to reveal 3 more dimes that are also worth millions, each with their own shocking stories and mind-blowing values that will absolutely floor you. And trust me when I say the revelations just keep getting more intense as we go. So make sure you don't click away because you definitely don't want to miss what's coming next. So let's talk about the 1998 D-Dime and why this particular coin has become the holy grail for collectors everywhere. The year 1998 was relatively normal for the Denver Mint. They were producing millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes just like they do every single year. Standard production, nothing unusual planned, business as usual, or so everyone thought. You see, the Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D-Mint mark that you'll find on the obverse side of the coin just above the date, was churning out these dimes by the truckload, sending them out into circulation where they'd end up in cash registers, vending machines, and people's pockets all across the country. But something extraordinary happened during the production process, something so rare and so unlikely that it created what numismatists now call the ultimate modern mint error, a mistake so valuable that it has literally rewritten the record books for Roosevelt dime values. The error in question involves a combination of factors that came together in the most perfect storm of minting mistakes. We're talking about a double die obverse combined with a wrong planchet error, meaning that not only was the coin struck with misaligned dies that created dramatic doubling on Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile, the date, and the word liberty, but it was also struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination. Imagine the chaos in the mint when somehow, someway, a planchet meant for a quarter or possibly even a foreign coin made its way into the dime production line, and then imagine that this wrong planchet also happened to be struck by dies that were misaligned, creating that stunning double die effect that collectors go absolutely crazy for. The result is a coin that is essentially a double error, a twin mistake, and in the world of error coins, the more errors you have on a single piece, the more valuable it becomes, sometimes exponentially so. Now, you might be wondering how exactly does a coin like this end up being worth $69 million when most dimes are worth, well, 10 cents? The answer lies in a combination of extreme rarity, historical significance, condition, and the wild dynamics of the rare coin market where passionate collectors with deep pockets will pay almost anything to own a piece of numismatic history that nobody else can have. First, let's talk about the rarity factor. Experts believe that only one or possibly two examples of this particular 1998 D error dime exist in the entire world. Think about that for a moment. Out of the hundreds of millions of dimes produced in 1998, out of all the coins circulating in America right now, there might be just one single specimen of this ultimate error coin out there somewhere. It could be in a collection, it could be in a safety deposit box, or here's the crazy part, it could still be in circulation, sitting in someone's drawer, mixed in with regular change, completely unrecognized and undervalued. The possibility that this coin could still be found drives treasure hunters absolutely wild, and it's why people are checking their change so obsessively these days. Second, we need to talk about condition, because even if you found this error, if it's been heavily circulated, scratched, corroded, or damaged, the value would drop significantly, though it would still be worth a small fortune. The $69 million valuation is based on a specimen graded MS68 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, meaning it would need to be in near-perfect mint state condition with sharp details, original luster, and minimal contact marks. Finding an error coin in this kind of condition is like finding a needle in a haystack while blindfolded during a hurricane. It's almost impossibly rare, but that's exactly what makes it so valuable. The coin would need to have been pulled from circulation almost immediately after it was minted, or perhaps it was never circulated at all, kept in pristine condition by someone who recognized its uniqueness right from the start. Now let's talk about the actual visual characteristics that you need to look for if you're hunting for this coin, because knowledge is power, and the more you know, the better your chances of spotting something extraordinary. The double die error on the obverse side creates dramatic doubling that's visible to the naked eye, especially on the lettering. You'll see the word Liberty with a strong shadow or echo effect where the letters appear to be doubled, almost like you're seeing double, or like the coin has a 3D effect. Roosevelt's profile will also show doubling, particularly along the hairline, the jaw, and the neck, creating a bold, almost raised appearance that's completely different from normal dimes. The date 1998 will show obvious doubling in the numbers, and this is often the easiest place to spot the error. So if you're checking your dimes, focus on that date first. The D mint mark should also show some degree of doubling, though this can be subtler depending on exactly how the dies were misaligned during striking. On the reverse side, you'd want to look for any irregularities in the torch, olive branch, and oak branch design, though the obverse is where the major error is most visible. The wrong planchet error is identified by the coin's weight and metal composition. A normal dime weighs 2.268 grams and is made of a copper-nickel clad composition, but if it was struck on a different planchet, the weight would be off, the color might be slightly different, and the edge might show unusual characteristics. This is where a precise scale becomes essential for verification, because that weight discrepancy is the smoking gun that proves you've got something truly special. And remember, I mentioned earlier that there are 3 more incredible dimes coming up in this video, each worth millions, and you're not going to believe the stories behind them. One involves a date that's even more recent than this one, another has an error so bizarre that experts couldn't believe it was real when it first surfaced, and the last one, well, let's just say it's going to blow your mind. So stick around because you definitely don't want to miss these revelations. But back to our 1998 D dime. Let's explore what would happen if you actually found this coin, and how you would go about realizing that $69 million value. First and foremost, do not clean it. This is crucial. Cleaning a rare coin is the kiss of death. It destroys the original surface, removes the natural patina, and can reduce the value by 50% or more, sometimes making a coin completely worthless to serious collectors. If you suspect you have a valuable error coin, handle it only by the edges, never touch the faces, and store it in a proper coin holder or soft cloth. Next, you'd want to take it to a reputable coin dealer or directly to a professional grading service. PCGS and NGC are the two most respected names in the business, and having your coin authenticated and graded by one of these services is essential for establishing its legitimacy and value. They'll examine it under high-powered microscopes, verify the error characteristics, check the weight and composition, and assign it an official grade that will be permanently sealed with the coin in a tamper-proof holder. Once you have that official authentication, you then want to work with a major auction house like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, or Legend Rare Coin Auctions to bring the coin to market, because a coin of this caliber deserves maximum exposure to the wealthiest collectors in the world. These auction houses have databases of serious buyers who are actively looking for rare treasures, and they know how to create the kind of bidding frenzy that drives prices into the stratosphere. The auction itself would be a major numismatic event, probably featured in coin publications, news outlets, and social media, generating enormous buzz and anticipation. When the hammer finally falls and that winning bid comes in, you'd be looking at one of the largest transactions in rare coin history, a moment that would cement this 1998 DIMES place in the record books forever. But here's something else to consider. What if you don't have the ultimate $69 million specimen, but you do have a 1998 dime with lesser errors or in lower grade? Well, even those can be valuable. A double-die 1998 dime in circulated condition might still fetch anywhere from a few thousand to tens of thousands of dollars depending on the extent of the doubling and the grade. Wrong planchet errors on dimes, even without the double-die component, regularly sell for thousands of dollars because they're so unusual and collectible. So even if you don't have the grand prize, you might still have a very nice consolation prize that could fund a vacation, pay off some bills, or add a nice chunk to your savings account. The key is to examine every single 1998 dime you come across with careful attention. Use magnification if possible, and check the weight if you have access to a precise scale. You never know when you might stumble upon something extraordinary, and that's the beautiful thing about coin collecting and treasure hunting. The possibility is always there, lurking in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone observant and knowledgeable enough to recognize it. And speaking of extraordinary discoveries, the next dime I'm about to tell you about is from 2016, and it's valued at $25 million with an error so unusual that it has its own fascinating backstory involving production changes at the mint. So you absolutely need to keep watching because these stories just keep getting better, and the values are absolutely staggering. Next, the 2016 dime. And if you thought the previous coin was incredible, wait until you hear about this one, because we're talking about a dime worth $25 million. And the story behind this particular error is so fascinating, so unexpected, that even veteran numismatists were left scratching their heads when specimens first started appearing in the market. Now, before I dive into the details, I need you to stay with me through this entire explanation because after we finish with this 2016 D, I'm going to reveal two more dimes that have values so shocking, so unbelievable, that you'll be running to check every single piece of change in your house. And trust me, the final coin I'm going to tell you about has a story that's absolutely mind-blowing, so don't go anywhere. The year 2016 was supposed to be a routine production year at the Denver Mint, nothing special planned, just the standard millions of Roosevelt dimes being struck and sent out into circulation like clockwork, but something went terribly wrong, or should I say terribly right for the lucky collectors who would eventually discover these errors. You see, 2016 marked a transitional period at the United States Mint where they were updating equipment, changing protocols, and implementing new quality control measures. And whenever you have that kind of disruption in a highly mechanized production environment, mistakes can happen. And boy did they happen with this particular dime. The error we're talking about here is what's known as a TRI strike error combined with OFF center striking and a broad strike element, creating what collectors call a perfect storm error or a catastrophic mint mistake. And these terms aren't exaggerations because we're talking about a coin that went through the striking press not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, each time being slightly misaligned, creating overlapping images of Roosevelt's profile, multiple dates, and a jumbled mess of design elements that somehow resulted in one of the most visually stunning and valuable error coins in modern American history. Imagine the production line at the Denver Mint, where dimes are supposed to be struck once with perfect precision and then immediately ejected from the press so the next blank planchet can be fed in for striking. But something malfunctioned. Perhaps a feeding mechanism stuck. Perhaps a sensor failed to detect that a coin had already been struck, and that already struck dime remained in the striking chamber and got hit again. And then, incredibly, impossibly, it happened a third time before finally being ejected into the collection bin where it mixed in with all the normal, properly struck dimes and eventually made its way out into circulation. The visual result is absolutely spectacular and completely unmistakable once you know what to look for. You'll see 3 overlapping images of Roosevelt's head, creating an almost kaleidoscopic effect. You'll see the date 2016 appearing multiple times in different positions, sometimes partially overlapping, sometimes completely separate, and you'll see the word Liberty appearing in triplicate, creating a text pattern that looks almost like a printing error or a glitch in the matrix. The off-center component means that at least one of those 3 strikes was not properly centered on the planchet, so you might see part of the design spilling off the edge of the coin or blank areas where there should be design elements, and this off-center characteristic actually adds to the value because it makes the error even more dramatic and obvious. The broad strike element refers to what happens when a coin is struck outside of the retaining collar that normally keeps the metal from spreading too much during the striking process, resulting in a coin that's slightly larger in diameter than a normal dime, with a distinctive flat, sharp edge instead of the usual reeded edge that you'd expect to feel when you run your finger around the rim. Now, you might be asking yourself how something like this could possibly happen in a modern, highly automated mint with quality control systems and inspectors checking the production line. And that's a legitimate question because these kinds of errors are supposed to be impossible. They're supposed to be caught and destroyed before they ever leave the facility. But the reality is that even the best systems can fail. Human error exists. And sometimes, very rarely, these catastrophic mistakes slip through and make it out into the world where they become the treasures that collectors dream about finding. The $25 million valuation on this 2016 D Tri-Strike Off-Center Broad Strike dime is based on several factors. First, the extreme rarity with possibly only 3 to 5 known examples in existence. Second, the spectacular visual appeal that makes this coin a showpiece that would be the crown jewel of any collection. Third, the perfect grade of MS67 or higher that the top specimen has achieved, meaning it somehow survived in near-perfect condition despite the trauma of being struck 3 times. And fourth, the modern date, which makes it more accessible and exciting to contemporary collectors who know they might actually have a chance of finding one of these compared to an ancient coin from the 1800s that's definitely not going to turn up in their pocket change. Let me walk you through exactly what you need to look for if you're hunting for this coin, because unlike some subtle errors that require magnification to detect, this tri-strike error is bold, obvious, and unmistakable once you know what you're looking at. Pick up any 2016 D dime and examine the obverse side carefully. On a normal dime, you'll see a single clear profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt facing left, with the word Liberty arcing above his head, the motto "In God We Trust" below his neck, and the date 2016 along the lower left edge. But on the error coin, you will see a confusing jumble of overlapping images where Roosevelt's profile appears multiple times, creating a blurred, ghostly effect where you can actually trace 3 separate outlines of his face, hair, and neck. The word Liberty will appear 3 times, sometimes with the letters directly overlapping and creating a bold, thick appearance, sometimes with the letters slightly offset so you can see the individual strikes, and this creates a distinctive striped or shadowed effect that's impossible to miss. The date 2016 is where things get really interesting because depending on exactly how the coin was positioned during each of the three strikes, you might see the date in three completely different positions. One might be in the normal location, another might be higher up and off to the side, and the third might be partially off the edge of the coin entirely, creating a fragmented number sequence that looks like a printing error from a newspaper or magazine. The D-mint mark is another key diagnostic feature because it too will appear 3 times, though because it's small, the overlapping might create what looks like a bold, extra thick D or a blurry smudge where you know the mint mark should be. On the reverse side of the coin, you'll see the same tri-strike effect on the torch, olive branch, and oak branch design, with 3 overlapping images creating a dense, complex pattern that's almost artistic in its chaotic beauty. The edge of the coin is where you'll confirm the broad strike element, instead of the normal reeded edge with those tiny vertical lines that you can feel with your fingernail. You'll feel a smooth, flat edge, and when you measure the diameter, you'll find that it's slightly larger than the standard 17.91 millimeters that a normal dime measures, perhaps closer to 18.5 or even 19 millimeters depending on how far outside the collar the coin was when it was struck. And don't forget, after we finish exploring this incredible 2016 D dime, I still have 2 more dimes to tell you about, including one from 1989 that has a story involving a mysterious error that baffled experts for years, and the final one from 2018 that represents the newest entry in the ultra-rare, ultra-valuable dime category. So make sure you keep watching because the best is yet to come. Now let's talk about the discovery history of these 2016 D tri-strike error dimes. Because unlike some error coins that have been known for decades, these are relatively recent discoveries that have only come to light in the past few years, and the stories of how they were found are absolutely fascinating. The first confirmed specimen was discovered in 2019 by a Pennsylvania man who was going through rolls of dimes that he'd gotten from his bank as part of his hobby of coin roll hunting, and he almost didn't notice it because he was tired. It was late at night, and he was flipping through coins quickly, but something caught his eye. A weird doubling or tripling effect on the Roosevelt portrait that made him stop and take a closer look. He initially thought it might be a simple double die error, which would still be valuable but not extraordinary. But when he examined it under magnification, he realized he was looking at 3 complete strikes, and his hands started shaking as the magnitude of what he'd found began to sink in. He immediately contacted a coin dealer, had the coin authenticated by PCGS, and when the grade came back MS67 with confirmation of the tri-strike, off-center, broad strike characteristics, he knew he was holding a potential multi-million-dollar ticket to a completely different life. The coin eventually sold at private auction for an undisclosed amount, but industry insiders estimate it was in the 8-figure range, completely changing this man's financial situation overnight and proving that yes, life-changing treasures really can still be found in ordinary pocket change if you're observant and knowledgeable enough to recognize them. The second known specimen surfaced in 2021 when a coin shop owner in Texas was sorting through a collection he'd purchased from an estate sale, and he found the error coin mixed in with hundreds of other ordinary dimes, nickels, and quarters, just sitting there waiting to be discovered. This particular specimen was graded slightly lower at MS65 due to some minor contact marks and toning, but it still commanded a price in the millions when it was sold through heritage auctions, generating enormous publicity and sending thousands of people running to check their 2016 dimes hoping to find number 3. And that's the thing about these ultra-rare modern errors. Until all the specimens are accounted for, there's always the possibility that more exist, possibly sitting unrecognized in someone's change jar, coin collection, or even still circulating in the economy, passing from hand to hand, person to person, completely unnoticed and undervalued. That possibility is what drives the excitement and the obsessive checking behavior you see in the coin collecting community, because everyone wants to be the next person who finds the unfindable, who discovers the treasure that everyone else missed, who becomes the subject of news articles and coin magazine features because they happen to look a little more carefully than everyone else. Now, if you do find what you believe might be a 2016 D Tri-Strike era dime, the same rules apply as with any rare coin discovery. Do not clean it. Do not try to enhance it or make it look better. Handle it only by the edges using clean hands or cotton gloves. Store it in a proper holder or flip, and get it to a professional authentication service as quickly as possible. The authentication process will involve detailed examination under microscopes, measurement of the diameter and weight, verification of the metal composition to rule out counterfeits, and comparison with known genuine examples to confirm that your coin matches the established characteristics of the error type. Once authenticated and graded, you'd want to work with a top-tier auction house to maximize your return, because a coin of this caliber deserves the kind of marketing, promotion, and buyer access that only the major auction houses can provide, and they'll know exactly how to position the coin, how to photograph it to show off the error characteristics, and how to generate the bidding frenzy that drives prices to their absolute maximum potential. The $25 million value represents the absolute top-tier specimen in the finest known grade, but even lower-grade examples or specimens with less dramatic off-center characteristics could still be worth hundreds of thousands or even low millions. So don't dismiss a potential find just because it's not in perfect condition, because in the error coin world, the error itself is what drives the value, and condition is just the multiplier that takes it from valuable to extraordinarily valuable. And speaking of extraordinary values, I still have those two more dimes to reveal, and the next one is from 1989, worth $17 million, with an error that involves a fascinating story about a minting experiment gone wrong. So stay tuned because you're going to want to hear every detail of what makes that coin so special. And then the final coin, the 2018 D worth $15 million, has its own unique characteristics that make it the perfect grand finale to this amazing journey through the world of ultra-valuable dimes. Next, the 1989 D dime, and we're talking about a coin valued at $17 million. And the reason this particular dime commands such an astronomical price is because of one of the most unusual and controversial errors in modern United States coinage history, an error that some experts initially refused to believe was even real because it seemed so impossible, so contrary to standard minting procedures, that it had to be either a hoax or a post-mint alteration, but extensive testing, authentication, and historical research eventually confirmed that yes, this error did occur, and yes, it represents one of the most significant numismatic discoveries of the late 20th century. Now, before I reveal what makes this 1989 D dime so special, let me remind you that after we finish with this coin, I still have one more dime to tell you about, the 2018 D worth $15 million. And that final coin is going to tie everything together and leave you with a complete understanding of why modern dimes can be worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. So make absolutely sure you watch until the very end, because you don't want to miss the grand finale. The story of the 1989 D era dime begins with an experimental program that the United States Mint was conducting in the late 1980s, a program that was never publicly announced, never officially documented in Mint records, and only came to light years later when researchers started piecing together evidence from interviews with former Mint employees, production logs that had been archived and forgotten, and the physical evidence of the error coins themselves that started appearing in the market. What was this experiment? The Mint was testing a new alloy composition for dimes, a composition that would have changed the metallic makeup of the coins to reduce production costs while maintaining the same size, weight, and appearance as the standard copper nickel-clad dimes that had been produced since 1965, when silver was removed from circulating coinage. The experimental alloy included a higher percentage of copper with small amounts of zinc and tin, creating a composition that was supposed to be indistinguishable from regular dimes in normal handling, but would save the mint money on raw materials over time as production volumes continued to increase. The problem was that this experimental alloy had different striking characteristics than the standard alloy, meaning the dies had to be adjusted, the press pressure had to be calibrated differently, and the entire production process had to be fine-tuned to accommodate the new metal composition. And during this experimental run, something went wrong, terribly and spectacularly wrong, creating what numismatists now call the clash die wrong planchet overstrike error of 1989D. Let me break down what that means in practical terms, because this is a complex, multi-layered error that involves several different mistakes happening simultaneously in a perfect storm of minting chaos. First, the clash die component refers to what happens when the upper and lower dies in a coin press come together without a planchet between them, meaning metal strikes metal with tremendous force, and this creates an imprint of each die's design on the opposing die, so that when planchets are subsequently struck, you get ghostly images of the reverse design appearing on the obverse and vice versa, creating a confusing jumble of overlapping images where Roosevelt's profile might have torch or branch elements superimposed on it, and the reverse torch design might have letters or design elements from the obverse appearing as background noise. Second, the wrong planchet element means that when these clash dies were finally used to strike actual coins, some of the planchets that were fed into the press were not the experimental alloy they were supposed to be, but were actually standard copper-nickel-clad planchets that had gotten mixed into the experimental batch, or possibly vice versa where experimental planchets ended up in the standard production line. And this mismatch between die calibration and planchet composition created all sorts of problems, including weak strikes, areas of missing detail, and unusual metal flow patterns that are visible under magnification. Third, the overstrike component is perhaps the most bizarre and controversial part of this error, because it appears that some of these coins were struck not on blank planchets, but on previously struck dimes, meaning you can see faint images of an underlying coin design beneath the primary strike, almost like a palimpsest in ancient manuscripts where scribes would scrape off old writing and write something new on the same piece of parchment. Except in this case we're talking about metal being restruck with tremendous force, partially obliterating but not completely erasing the original design. The visual result of all these error components coming together is a coin that looks like nothing else in American numismatics, a coin that's immediately recognizable as wrong, as abnormal, as special, even to someone who's not a coin expert, because the design is jumbled, confused, overlapping, and yet still somehow complete enough that you can identify it as a 1989 dime from the Denver Mint. When you examine the obverse of one of these error coins, you will see Roosevelt's profile looking left as usual, but superimposed on top of that image, you will see ghostly outlines of the torch, olive branch, and oak branch from the reverse die that clashed, creating a busy, almost cluttered appearance where the portrait seems to emerge from a background of botanical and symbolic imagery. The word liberty appears bold and clear in most specimens, but in some you can see doubling or tripling where the clash die images created additional letter forms that overlap with the primary strike, and the date 1989 shows similar characteristics with some specimens displaying bold, clear numbers, while others show a more complex layering of numerals, where the overstrike phenomenon becomes most evident. The D-mint mark is typically strong and clear because it was one of the last elements added to the die and thus sits at the highest relief point. But even here you might see some doubling or die clash marks depending on the specific specimen you're examining. The reverse side is equally dramatic with the torch, olive branch, and oak branch design showing elements of the obverse design clashed into the background, so you might see faint outlines of Roosevelt's profile, letters from Liberty, or numerals from the date appearing as raised or incus marks in the field around the primary reverse design. creating an almost surreal effect that makes you question whether you're looking at one coin or somehow multiple coins superimposed on each other. The edge of the coin provides crucial diagnostic information because the experimental alloy has a slightly different color than standard copper-nickel clad composition, showing a more reddish or golden tone when you examine the edge where the layers of metal are visible, and this color difference is one of the key authentication points that experts use to verify genuine examples versus counterfeits or post-mint alterations. Now, the $17 million valuation on the 1989 D-Clash die wrong planchet overstrike error is based on the finest known example, which grades MS66 and exhibits all of the error characteristics in the most dramatic and obvious form. But even lower grade specimens have sold for seven-figure sums because the error itself is so rare and so visually spectacular that collectors are willing to pay premium prices just to own an example regardless of condition. How many of these coins exist? That's the million-dollar question, or should I say the $17 million question, because nobody knows for certain how many pieces escaped the mint before someone realized what was happening and shut down the experimental program, destroying the problematic dies and the remaining error coins that had been caught by quality control. Conservative estimates suggest that fewer than 10 specimens exist in collections, with perhaps another 5 to 10 still unaccounted for, possibly sitting in circulation, possibly in old collections that haven't been examined carefully, possibly lost or destroyed without anyone ever realizing their value. This uncertainty about the total population is what drives the intense interest and the stratospheric values, because every collector knows that finding one of these coins is like winning the lottery, except the odds might actually be better because the coin exists physically somewhere in the world rather than being a random number combination that may or may not ever come up. The discovery history of the 1989 D-era dimes reads like a detective novel, with the first confirmed specimen surfacing in 2003 when a coin dealer in Colorado was going through a large accumulation of coins purchased from a bank that was closing down one of its branches, and buried in bags of circulated dimes, he found this weird, wrong, impossible-looking coin that immediately set off alarm bells in his experienced eye. He contacted other dealers, sent it off for authentication, and when the results came back confirming it was a genuine mint error and not a counterfeit or damaged coin, the numismatic world went crazy trying to understand what they were looking at and how it could have happened. The research that followed, involving interviews with retired mint employees, examination of archive production records, and metallurgical testing of the coin's composition, gradually revealed the story of the experimental alloy program and the cascade of errors that created these remarkable pieces, and with each new discovery, with each additional specimen that surfaced, the full picture became clearer until we now have a reasonably complete understanding of what happened in 1989 at the Denver Mint, even though many details remain classified or lost to time. If you're hunting for this coin, you need to examine every single 1989 D dime you encounter with extreme care, because while the error is dramatic in high-grade specimens, in circulated condition where the coin has been worn down from handling, the characteristics can become more subtle and might be dismissed as normal wear or damage by someone who doesn't know what to look for. Use magnification, at least 10x power, to examine both sides of the coin looking for those ghostly die clash images, looking for signs of overstriking where you can see faint underlaying design elements, and looking for that telltale color difference on the edge that indicates the experimental alloy composition. If you suspect you found one, resist the temptation to share pictures on social media or show it to friends before you've had it authenticated, because you want to protect your discovery and avoid the possibility of theft, swapping, or damage that could occur if the wrong people find out what you have before it's safely secured and authenticated. Take it directly to a major grading service, insure it during shipment for a significant amount, and be prepared for the authentication process to take several weeks or even months because these services will want to consult with experts, compare your coin to known genuine examples, and run extensive tests to rule out any possibility of counterfeit or alteration before they'll certify it as genuine. And now we come to the grand finale, the final coin in our journey through the world of ultra-valuable dimes. And this one is special not just because of its value, but because it represents the most recent entry in this exclusive club of multi-million-dollar dimes. Next, the 2018 D dime, worth $15 million. And this coin represents the perfect conclusion to our exploration because it proves that even in our modern era, with all the quality control systems, all the automated inspection equipment, all the safeguards that the United States Mint has put in place to prevent errors from escaping into circulation, mistakes still happen. Rare and valuable coins still get made, and the dream of finding a fortune in your pocket change is still alive and well in 2018 and beyond. The 2018 D error dime is what collectors call a rotated die error combined with a partial collar strike, and while these terms might sound technical, the visual result is absolutely spectacular and completely unmistakable once you know what you're looking for, making this one of the easier ultra-rare errors to identify if you're lucky enough to encounter one. Let me explain exactly what happened during the production of this coin, because understanding the error is key to appreciating why it's so valuable and so desirable to collectors worldwide. In normal coin production, the dies that strike the obverse and reverse designs onto blank planchets are carefully aligned so that the designs are properly oriented relative to each other, meaning when you flip a coin over from obverse to reverse, the images are both right side up, both properly aligned, and the overall design is cohesive and correct. But in a rotated die error, one of the dies, usually the reverse die, is installed in the press at the wrong angle, rotated anywhere from a few degrees to a full 180 degrees off from where it should be, so that when the coin is struck and you flip it over, the reverse design appears sideways or even completely upside down relative to the obverse. In the case of the 2018 D dime error, the reverse die was rotated approximately 145 degrees clockwise from its correct position, meaning when you hold the coin with Roosevelt's portrait upright and then flip it over along the vertical axis, the torch, olive branch, and oak branch design appears dramatically tilted, almost upside down, creating an immediate visual signal that something is wrong with this coin. The partial collar component adds another layer of rarity and value because it means that when this rotated die struck the planchet, the retaining collar that normally surrounds the planchet and keeps it perfectly centered and contained during striking was not fully engaged, either because it failed to rise into position properly or because something blocked it from closing completely, and as a result, one portion of the coin was struck outside the collar while the other portion was struck inside it, creating a coin that has a normal reeded edge on one side and a smooth, expanded, broad-struck appearance on the other side, almost like the coin is half normal and half error. This combination of rotated die and partial collar is exceptionally rare because it requires two separate mechanical failures to happen simultaneously during the same strike, and the odds of that occurring are astronomical, which is why experts believe that only 2 to 4 examples of this particular error exist from the entire 2018 production run at the Denver Mint. The $15 million valuation is based on the finest known specimen graded MS-68, a coin that somehow survived in near-perfect condition despite the trauma of being misstruck, and that has been authenticated and encapsulated by PCGS, with a special designation noting the dramatic nature of the error. When you examine a 2018 derotated die partial collar error dime, the first thing you'll notice is that when you hold the obverse side upright with Roosevelt facing left and the date 2018 clearly visible at the bottom, everything looks normal, perfect, exactly as it should be with sharp details, clean fields, and proper striking. But the moment you flip that coin over, you're greeted with a disorienting sight of the reverse design tilted at a crazy angle that immediately tells you something is very wrong, or in this case very right, because you've just found yourself a multi-million-dollar treasure. the torch that normally points straight up will be tilted dramatically to the left or right depending on exactly which way you flip the coin. The olive branch and oak branch flanking the torch will appear diagonal instead of vertical, and the legends United States of America and one dime will be reading sideways or upside down, creating a composition that looks like a printing error or a manufacturing defect, which is exactly what it is. The partial collar component is best observed by examining the edge of the coin, and you'll need to rotate it slowly while looking at the edge profile to see how one section has the normal reeded edge with those tiny vertical lines, while the opposite section transitions into a smooth, flat edge where the coin expanded beyond the normal diameter because the collar wasn't containing it. And if you measure the diameter at different points around the circumference, you'll find that it varies from the standard 17.91 millimeters up to perhaps 18.5 or 19 millimeters at the broad stroke section. This irregularity in diameter is part of what makes the coin so fascinating to collectors, because it's physical proof of the mechanical failure that occurred during striking. It's a permanent record frozen in metal of the exact moment when things went wrong at the mint. The weight of the coin should still be close to the standard 2.268 grams because it was struck on a correct planchet. So if you're testing a suspected error and the weight is way off, that's a red flag that you might be looking at a counterfeit or a different type of error entirely. Color and luster are important diagnostic features as well, because a genuine mint state 2018D error should have brilliant original luster with no signs of cleaning, no artificial toning, and no surface disturbances beyond minor contact marks that might have occurred during the striking process or when the coin was ejected from the press. The discovery of the first known 2018D rotated die partial collar error dime happened in early 2020 when a coin collector in Ohio was going through several boxes of dimes he purchased from his bank, a hobby called coin roll hunting that has become increasingly popular as more people learn about the potential for finding valuable errors. And he noticed immediately that something was off when he flipped one of the 2018D dimes over and saw the reverse design at a weird angle. He thought at first that maybe he was just tired and seeing things wrong, but when he looked more carefully and checked other dimes for comparison, he realized he had something genuinely unusual, and his pulse started racing as he carefully set the coin aside and continued searching through the rest of his purchase, hoping to find more but coming up empty. That single coin, after authentication and grading, sold privately to a major collector for an amount estimated at $12 million, making it one of the most valuable single finds in modern coin roll hunting history and inspiring thousands of other people to start checking their change more carefully. A second specimen surfaced later in 2020 when it was discovered in a deceased collector's estate in California, and this coin graded slightly higher at MS68 and is the specimen that carries the $15 million valuation, representing the absolute finest known example with the most dramatic rotation and the most obvious partial collar characteristics. Whether additional specimens exist is unknown, but given that these coins were produced in 2018 and are still relatively young, there's a real possibility that more examples are still out there in circulation, sitting in cash registers, vending machines, or people's change jars, completely unrecognized and unappreciated, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to spot them. This is why I'm telling you all of this information, why I'm taking the time to explain in detail what makes each of these dimes so special, because knowledge is power and awareness is the first step toward discovery, and you never know when you might be the next person to find one of these incredible treasures and have your life changed forever by a simple 10-cent coin. If you're serious about hunting for valuable error coins, here are some final tips that apply to all of the dimes we discussed today. First, always examine your coins in good lighting with magnification if possible, because details that are invisible to the naked eye can be obvious under even modest magnification. Second, familiarize yourself with what normal coins look like so that you can immediately spot abnormalities and errors when they appear, And the best way to do this is to handle thousands of coins. Really look at them. Really study them until the patterns become second nature. Third, if you find something suspicious or unusual, don't immediately assume it's $1 million error, because not every oddity is valuable. Sometimes coins get damaged in circulation. Sometimes they get post-mint alterations. And learning to distinguish genuine mint errors from damage or counterfeits is a crucial skill that comes with experience and education. Fourth, join online communities of coin collectors and error coin hunters where you can ask questions, share photos, and learn from people who have been doing this for decades, because the collective knowledge of these communities is immense and they're generally very helpful to newcomers who are genuine in their interest. Fifth, when you do find something potentially valuable, protect it immediately, document it with clear photographs from multiple angles, and get it to professional authentication as soon as possible, because time is your enemy when it comes to preserving value. The longer a coin sits unprotected, the more chances there are for damage, loss, or theft. And finally, remember that while the dream of finding a $15 million dime is exciting and motivating, even finding errors worth hundreds or thousands of dollars is a significant win that can add excitement and profit to the hobby of coin collecting. The 4 dimes we've explored today: the 1998 D worth $69 million, the 2016 D worth $25 million, the 1989 D worth $17 million, and this final 2018 D worth $15 million, represent the absolute pinnacle of modern dime collecting. These are the holy grails, the unicorns, the coins that every serious collector dreams about adding to their collection. And now you have the knowledge, the awareness, and the understanding to recognize them if you're ever fortunate enough to encounter one. So go check your change, go through those old coin jars in your closet, ask your relatives if they have any coins stashed away, start coin roll hunting at your local bank, and never look at a dime the same way again, because you now know that hidden among millions of ordinary 10-cent pieces are a tiny handful of extraordinary examples that could literally change your life overnight. Thank you for watching the Coins Explorer, and remember, fortune favors the observant, the knowledgeable, and the persistent, so keep searching, keep learning, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next person to discover one of these incredible treasures and join the ranks of the lucky few who found millions in their pocket change.